Today, we embark on a deeply emotional story about resilience, motherhood, and justice. This is the story of Camila Morales, a strong single mother, and her 5-year-old daughter, Alina, on a flight they believed would take them toward a promising new beginning. But instead of peace, they encountered a series of shocking events, starting with the cold indifference of flight attendant Veronica and ending with an unimaginable act, a slap across Alina's tiny cheek. That moment not only sent shockwaves through the cabin, but also ignited a fierce fire of determination within Camilla, forcing her to stand up and fight for justice for her daughter. But what drove Veronica to such an extreme action? And will Camilla be able to reclaim justice in the face of overwhelming obstacles? Follow this story to uncover a mother's journey from pain to victory, a story that will make the world question the meaning of empathy and fairness. If you believe in stories about courage and justice that have the power to move hearts, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us. Your support fuels our mission to bring you more inspiring and meaningful stories. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from and share your thoughts about this story. Your support is the strength that keeps justice alive. Camilla kept her steps steady, though her heart was pounding with tension. This was not just an ordinary flight. It was a journey carrying the hopes for a better future for both mother and daughter. After months of persistence, applications, and waiting, she had finally secured an interview for a lawyer position at a prestigious firm in Portland. If successful, it would be the breakthrough she and Alina needed to build a stable life after years of struggle. Alina swung her mother's arm gently, a bright smile on her face. "Mom, do you think the plane is so big we can see the clouds?" Camilla bent down, gently stroking Alina's jet black hair, where colorful beads made soft clicking sounds every time the little girl moved. "Yes, sweetheart. We'll fly so high you'll see the clouds right outside the window." Alina's eyes sparkled like stars. She hugged her white stuffed bunny tightly, the same bunny she always carried like a trusted friend. At the boarding gate, people gathered in small groups, each with their own stories. Business travelers glued to their laptops, families murmuring softly while their children clung to their legs. Camilla pulled Alina close, adjusted the strap of her handbag on her shoulder, and checked their boarding passes. As they reached the boarding podium, a flight attendant appeared with a poised demeanor. It was Veronica. Her golden blonde hair was neatly tied up, and her navy blue uniform was impeccably pressed. But what caught Camilla's attention was the absence of warmth in Veronica's smile. Veronica's eyes scanned Camilla and Alina before glancing down at their boarding passes, as if evaluating them. A flicker of something sharp, almost disdainful, flashed across her face. Camilla nodded politely, offering a cordial smile. "Hello, we're at the right gate for the flight to Portland, aren't we?" Veronica smiled, but her eyes remained unchanged, cold and detached. "Yes, you are. Please wait while I scan your passes." Camilla felt a slight unease but quickly brushed it off. "Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive." "She's just doing her job," she reassured herself. As Camilla and Alina stepped into the jet bridge leading to the cabin, the bustling noise of the airport gradually gave way to the relative calm inside the plane. Camilla took a deep breath, savoring the temporary stillness. "We're about to take off, Alina. Are you ready?" Alina bounced excitedly. "I'm ready, Mom." The two made their way to seats 14A and 14B, the window seats just as Camilla had promised her daughter. Alina quickly climbed onto the seat and pressed her face against the small circular window, her eyes wide with curiosity as she tried to look outside. Camilla stowed their bag neatly in the overhead compartment before settling into the seat next to her daughter. She reached into her bag, pulling out a coloring book and a box of crayons, handing them to Alina to keep her entertained while they waited. "Look, Mom!" Alina held up the page where she had colored a purple cat surrounded by twinkling yellow stars. Camilla chuckled. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. You're so good at coloring." Alina's laughter rang out, clear and bright, like a melody that seemed to wash away all of Camilla's worries. Camilla leaned back into her seat and closed her eyes for a brief moment. This was why she worked so hard, to give Alina a better future. The captain's voice came over the intercom, reminding passengers to fasten their seatbelts. The plane's engines began to hum softly, signaling that the moment of takeoff had arrived. Camilla held Alina's hand and smiled with hope as the plane began to taxi down the long stretch of runway. The engines roared as the plane accelerated, lifting gently off the ground and carrying hundreds of passengers away from the bustling city below. Alina let out an excited gasp as she watched the buildings shrink and the white clouds, soft like cotton candy, float past the small circular window. "Mom, I can see the clouds!" Alina exclaimed, pressing her tiny hands against the window. Camilla smiled and kissed her daughter's sweet-smelling hair. "See? I told you. We're flying through the most beautiful clouds." Alina stared at the view outside as if she were admiring a magical new world. For a brief moment, Camilla allowed herself to relax. This was a promising start to their journey. About 10 minutes after the plane reached cruising altitude, the flight attendants began serving refreshments. Camilla raised her hand when Veronica pushed the beverage cart toward their row. "Could I get an apple juice for my daughter, please?" Camilla asked, her tone friendly but respectful. Veronica hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning Camilla before drifting down to Alina, as though evaluating every detail once more. A faint, cold smile flickered across her face. There was no greeting, no warmth in her demeanor. She poured the juice hastily, causing some of the liquid to splash over the rim of the cup, and then placed it down roughly in front of Alina. The cup wobbled and a few drops spilled onto the small tray table. "Thank you," Camilla said, keeping her tone calm despite the unease rising within her. Veronica did not respond. She turned away and continued pushing the cart down the aisle. Camilla pressed her lips together, reminding herself that it was probably an unintentional gesture and that she shouldn't read too much into it. But Alina had noticed something unusual. She tugged at her mother's sleeve, her wide, innocent eyes looking up in confusion. "Mom, why didn't she smile at us?" Alina whispered. Camilla stroked her daughter's hair and offered a gentle smile to reassure her. "Maybe she's just tired, sweetheart. Everyone has bad days sometimes." Alina nodded quietly, though the smile on her face faded a little as she turned back to her coloring book. At the front of the cabin, another flight attendant, Sandra, whose eyes were kind and smile warm, was serving the first few rows with a cheerful demeanor. Camilla caught a glimpse of her and noticed how different her approach was compared to Veronica's. Maybe I'm not imagining things after all, Camilla thought. Nearby, a middle-aged man sitting by the aisle laughed as he chatted with Sandra while she handed him a cup of coffee. Their conversation was easy and pleasant, like two old acquaintances catching up. There was no trace of coldness, no hint of indifference, only friendliness and warmth. Camilla let out a quiet breath and forced herself to push aside the negative thoughts, choosing instead to focus on Alina. The cabin grew quieter as passengers settled into their seats, enjoying their drinks or watching the in-flight entertainment. Alina was drawing another picture, a flock of bluebirds soaring through clouds. Camilla pulled out her phone to review some notes for her upcoming interview. She scrolled through the documents she had spent the last week preparing, trying to concentrate. But somewhere in the back of her mind, the lingering discomfort from Veronica's cold attitude remained. A slight jolt made the plane sway gently. The seatbelt sign blinked on, and the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. We are approaching a small patch of turbulence." Camilla quickly buckled Alina's seatbelt and patted her hand reassuringly. "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a bit of wind. It'll pass soon." Alina nodded obediently, but her small hand still clung tightly to her mother's. The plane shook lightly a few more times before stabilizing again. Then Alina furrowed her brow, her big eyes growing round. "Mom, I need to use the bathroom." Camilla glanced at the illuminated seatbelt sign, then down at her daughter, who was shifting uncomfortably in her seat. She weighed her options quickly. The turbulence had almost subsided, and the bathroom was just a few rows away. She decided they couldn't wait any longer. "All right, we'll go. We'll walk slowly and carefully, okay?" She unbuckled her seatbelt, gently helped Alina stand, and guided her into the narrow aisle, each step cautious as if crossing a swaying suspension bridge. But just as they reached the bathroom door, a cold, cutting voice sliced through the air. "Did you not see the seatbelt sign?" Camilla looked up and saw Veronica standing in the aisle, arms crossed over her chest like a gatekeeper guarding an entrance, her eyes cold and unyielding. Camilla kept her composure, responding in a calm yet firm voice. "She needs to use the restroom urgently. We'll return to our seats as soon as she's done." Veronica didn't move. She shook her head, her expression rigid and resolute. That's a violation of safety regulations. No one is allowed to leave their seat while the seatbelt sign is on. Camilla frowned, feeling a wave of frustration rising in her chest. Can you make an exception? She's only 5 years old. But Veronica responded with a steely glare, her eyes as sharp as iron. Rules are rules. A few nearby passengers began to take notice. A woman seated near the aisle watched the scene with concern. Alina clung tightly to her mother's leg, her small voice trembling. Mommy? Camilla bent down to comfort her daughter, gently stroking her hair as she tried to calm the storm of anger swirling inside her. We'll be quick, Camilla repeated, her voice still steady, but now laced with tension. Veronica tightened her crossed arms, her face unreadable, yet colder than ever. You need to return to your seat now. I've already told you. Alina gripped her mother's hand even tighter, her small fingers trembling. Camilla could feel her daughter's fear through every squeeze, and it only fueled the silent fury simmering within her. Can't you be a bit more flexible? Camilla asked, her tone strained with a mix of restraint and rising anger. She's just 5 years old. It'll only take a minute. Veronica took a small step forward, as though using her entire body to block the path to the restroom. Her voice turned sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. You're disregarding safety protocols. If everyone acted like you, this flight would fall into chaos. Alina tugged at her mother's shirt, tears beginning to pool in her eyes. Mommy, I really need to go now. Camilla bent down, whispering softly into her daughter's ear, as if making a promise. It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. I'll take care of it. She straightened herself, meeting Veronica's eyes head-on. In her mind, she knew that if she had to raise her voice to protect her daughter, she wouldn't hesitate. Then in a brief but agonizing moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, it happened faster than anyone could react. Veronica raised her hand abruptly, her face twisted with unrestrained anger. Smack! The sound of the slap echoed loudly in the quiet cabin. Alina staggered backward, one cheek burning red. She didn't cry immediately. She was too shocked. Her small body seemed frozen for a few seconds. Then a piercing wail of pain and fear erupted from her, cutting through the cabin and causing every head to turn toward them. Camilla's world stopped. Her heart shattered into thousands of sharp, jagged pieces, each one stabbing her soul. Oh my God! A passenger nearby gasped, covering their mouth in disbelief. Camilla dropped to her knees, gathering Alina into her arms and holding her tightly. Her daughter sobbed uncontrollably, her small arms wrapped around her mother's neck, as though searching for absolute protection. Camilla's entire body shook as tears streamed down her cheeks, not from fear, but from a rage so powerful it made her breath catch in her throat. Slowly she stood, locking eyes with Veronica. Her gaze was like a blade of ice cutting through the air. What did you just do? Camilla shouted, her voice cracking but filled with power. Veronica, as though suddenly realizing what she'd done, took a small step back. Her eyes widened with brief shock before her face shifted into a defensive stubbornness. I didn't mean to, but you ignored the warning. An older man a few rows back stood abruptly. His name was Victor, a retired doctor with a kind face, though now his expression was fierce with outrage. You had no right to do that! Victor's voice boomed through the cabin, full of authority and fury. You hurt a child! Another passenger, a middle-aged woman named Clara sitting near the aisle, shook her head as tears welled in her eyes. I saw everything. She was just trying to protect her daughter. How could you? The cabin filled with murmurs as passengers voiced their anger. Alina's cries continued, softening only as Camilla whispered soothing words into her ear. Another flight attendant rushed over. It was Sandra, the one with kind eyes and a gentle presence. She knelt beside Camilla and Alina, her face stricken with worry. Are you and your daughter okay? I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. Sandra's voice trembled with sincerity. Camilla didn't respond immediately. She was trying to keep herself from exploding, forcing her mind to stay clear despite the overwhelming sense of injustice that made her want to scream for the whole world to hear. At that moment, the captain's voice rang out over the intercom, calm but commanding. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm and return to your seats. We will handle this situation. Chief Flight Attendant, please report to the cockpit immediately. Sandra helped Camila and Alina back to their seats, handing Alina a tissue and a small cup of water to help her settle down. Veronica stood frozen in place, her eyes scanning the faces of the passengers who were glaring at her with fury. She tried to maintain a stoic facade, but fear began to seep into her expression, as if she was beginning to comprehend that her actions had crossed a line she couldn't step back from. Camila kissed Alina's forehead and whispered, "Mommy's here. No one will hurt you again." The atmosphere in the cabin was taut as a bowstring. Murmurs swelled into loud whispers as passengers began raising their voices. Some stood up from their seats to get a better view of what had just happened. Veronica's slap was like a shock wave that left the entire cabin stunned. Victor, the older man, stepped forward toward Veronica, his voice ringing out clearly. "You hurt an innocent child. Do you understand how serious that is?" A few other passengers began shouting, "Fire her immediately! This is unacceptable!" Veronica, pale-faced, tried to remain calm, but couldn't hide her panic. She stammered, I didn't mean to. I was just trying to ensure the flight's safety." Camila stood up from her seat, her eyes blazing like twin flames. Her voice was icy but laced with terrifying restraint. "Safety? Are you talking about safety when you slap my daughter? Is that what you call following regulations?" Alina was still sobbing in her mother's arms, her cheeks flushed red, and her small face streaked with tears. Camila held her tightly, as if trying to shield her from the entire world. At that moment, Sandra, the flight attendant with the concerned eyes, stepped forward and placed a hand on Camila's shoulder. "I'm so sorry. I truly don't know what to say," Sandra said, her voice trembling with guilt and sympathy. She turned to Veronica, her eyes filled with disappointment. "Veronica, step back immediately," Sandra said firmly, showing a rare moment of authority. Veronica stared at her colleague for a brief moment, then reluctantly backed away toward the galley. But her expression was still defiant, mixed with a hint of panic. At that moment, Mark, the lead flight attendant, emerged from first class with a tense expression. His uniform was impeccably neat, but his eyes betrayed the urgency of the situation. "What's going on here?" Mark's voice was deep and authoritative as he addressed the cabin. Sandra quickly reported the incident, while the surrounding passengers all began speaking at once. "She slapped a child. A flight attendant like her doesn't belong on this plane." Mark raised his hand to calm the growing uproar, then bent down to speak to Camila in a calm but sincere voice. "Ma'am, we are deeply sorry for this. I'll handle the situation right away. Does your daughter need medical attention?" Camila, still holding Alina tightly, her eyes red with restrained anger, replied, "We need a doctor to check her as soon as we land." Mark nodded and spoke into his intercom, requesting that a medical team be prepared at the gate upon landing. He turned back to Veronica, his gaze so stern that no one dared question his authority. "Veronica, return to the galley and stay there for the rest of the flight. You are not to re-enter the passenger cabin." Veronica froze, as if about to say something, but then lowered her head and walked away in silent, seething frustration. Camila gently wiped away the tears on Alina's cheeks with the tissue Sandra had handed her. Alina shivered slightly, but when she saw her mother's gentle smile, she began to relax. "I'm here, sweetheart. No one can hurt you anymore," Camila whispered softly. Victor, the older man, turned to Camila with genuine concern. "If you need witnesses, I, along with many others here, will testify for you. This cannot be ignored." Camila nodded, her voice filled with gratitude and unwavering resolve. "Thank you. I won't let this go unanswered." The cabin slowly returned to an uneasy silence. Some passengers pulled out their phones as if to jot down notes about what had happened, though they remained in airplane mode. Curious and sympathetic glances kept drifting toward Camila and Alina, filled with empathy and outrage on their behalf. Mark sat down briefly next to Camila and spoke in a low voice. "When we land, a representative from the airline will meet you to address this incident. I promise you, we will make sure this never happens again." Camila stared directly into his eyes and replied, her voice steady, "I don't need empty promises. I need action and justice for my daughter." Mark remained silent for a moment, then nodded in understanding before rising to return to his post. Alina began to calm down, resting her face against her mother's shoulder and breathing softly like a kitten seeking comfort. Camila gently patted her daughter's back, but inside a storm of anger and determination swelled, refusing to be tamed. The plane's engines hissed as it began its descent, preparing to land at Portland International Airport. Every passing minute felt like an hour for Camila. She held Alina tightly in her arms, listening to her daughter's steady breathing as she drifted off to sleep after crying herself into exhaustion. The skin on Alina's cheek was still flushed, a harsh reminder of the cruel act Camila had just witnessed. Camila turned her head to look out the window. The field stretched out beneath them, becoming clearer through the thin layers of white clouds. The serenity outside only made her heart ache more as she thought about what Alina had endured. Mark, the lead flight attendant, spoke over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon be landing at Portland International Airport. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing. Our crew is available to assist if you need any help." Camila gave Alina's small hand a gentle squeeze to reassure her, though inside she was bracing herself for what was to come after they deboarded the plane. Veronica will be held accountable, she thought to herself, and the fire of determination burned quietly in her chest. The wheels hit the runway with a loud thud, followed by a slight jolt that woke Alina. She rubbed her eyes, her large brown eyes still rimmed with the remnants of dried tears. "Mommy, are we down now?" Alina asked softly, her voice still trembling. Camila brushed her daughter's cheek, feeling the soft skin that was still slightly swollen. She gave Alina a gentle smile. "Yes, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. I promise." As soon as the plane came to a complete stop, Mark's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. Airport security will be boarding the plane to assist with an urgent matter. We ask for your patience and cooperation." The entire cabin fell into an anxious hush. Many passengers strained their necks to see the plane's main door, where a group of uniformed security officers appeared, looking stern and professional. Next to them was a medic carrying a first aid kit. Camila straightened in her seat, her gaze resolute as the officers made their way down the aisle. The head of the security team gave a small nod as he stopped at row 14, where Camila and Alina were seated. "Ms. Morales, we are airport security. We've received a report about an incident on this flight. Is Alina okay?" the officer asked, his tone calm but concerned. Camila nodded, though her voice caught slightly as she replied, "She's okay, but I want her to have a medical examination. I need to make sure that slap didn't cause any lasting damage." The medic knelt beside Alina, gently examining her face and listening to her heartbeat. Alina sat quietly, her wide eyes filled with worry as she looked at her mother, but she remained calm because she felt safe in Camila's arms. Meanwhile, Veronica was escorted out of the cabin by two security officers walking on either side of her. Her face was pale, her eyes blank with disbelief, as if she couldn't comprehend what was happening. A few passengers murmured, "She deserves this. That poor child didn't deserve any of it." Some passengers turned to Camila and gave her encouraging nods as if silently letting her know they were on her side. Sandra, the kind flight attendant, still stood near Camila's row. She placed a gentle hand on Camila's shoulder. "You're incredibly strong, Camila." "I'm so sorry this happened," Sandra said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. Camila turned to Sandra, her gaze softening slightly. "Thank you, Sandra, but this isn't over. I won't stop until justice is served." Sandra nodded, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I'll testify if you need me to." A representative from the airline, dressed in a sharp black suit, entered from the front door of the plane, his face tense. He approached Camila and bowed his head apologetically. "We are deeply sorry for this unacceptable incident. We will ensure that Alina receives immediate medical attention, and we will make sure this matter is handled thoroughly." Camila quietly took the business card he handed her, though her expression remained icy and unreadable. "I will be contacting your higher management. I need more than an apology," Camila said, her voice calm but unwavering. As Camila and Alina stepped off the plane, a few passengers clapped lightly, as if offering their support. Camila nodded in silent acknowledgement, her hand firmly holding Alina's small one. Alina glanced curiously at the people around them, her gaze timid but inquisitive. Outside the doors leading into the main terminal, Camila spotted her sister Alina waiting with a worried expression. Alina rushed toward them, kneeling to wrap Alina in a warm embrace. "Are you okay? What happened?" Alina asked, her voice full of concern. Camila recounted everything with a trembling voice filled with anger, but her eyes still gleamed with determination. "Veronica will pay for this. I will do everything in my power to make sure no one else has to go through what we did." Alina hugged both Camila and Alina tightly. "I'm with you, always. We won't let this slide." The sound of footsteps and the chatter of travelers echoed through the terminal, but Camilla's focus remained unshaken. She took a deep breath as they headed toward the medical center for Alina's checkup. This was only the beginning of her fight for justice, and she was prepared to see it through to the end. For Alina and for every other child who deserved to feel safe, no matter where they were. Camilla walked briskly through the airport hallway, feeling the weight of countless eyes watching as she and Alina made their way toward the medical evaluation area. She could hear the whispers, the murmurs of sympathy, and the hushed speculations behind her, but she blocked it all out. Right now, her only priority was Alina. A female doctor with kind eyes approached and smiled at Alina. "Hello, sweetheart. I'm Dr. Hannah. I'm just going to check your cheek, okay? It won't hurt, I promise." Alina nodded slightly, still wary but not resisting. Camilla sat beside her daughter and gently rubbed her back to reassure her. Dr. Hannah carefully placed a cold compress against Alina's cheek, her expression softening with compassion as she examined the red mark on the little girl's face. "There are no signs of serious injury, but her cheek will be swollen for a few days," Dr. Hannah said quietly to Camilla. "I'll prescribe a mild pain reliever if she needs it, along with some care instructions." Camilla clenched her hands, holding back a heavy sigh. She felt a small sense of relief that Alina wasn't seriously hurt, but the ache in her heart remained sharp. This wasn't just about the physical bruise, it was about the emotional trauma her daughter had endured. As Camilla left the medical room with Alina in her arms, her phone rang. It was a call from the airline's corporate office. The voice on the other end belonged to someone from the complaints department. The man spoke with a tone that was both tense and overly professional. "Ms. Morales, we deeply apologize for the incident. We would like to invite you to our office to discuss the situation and work toward a resolution." Camilla paused for a moment, then replied, her voice calm but resolute. "Fine, but understand this. I don't need empty apologies. I need action and justice for my daughter." The airline's conference room was sleekly designed, with a long table and high-back leather chairs. However, the atmosphere felt suffocating as Camilla entered with her attorney, Julian Reyes, a seasoned civil rights lawyer known for his sharp intellect and unyielding resolve. Across the table sat Mr. Benson, the airline's senior representative, along with several members of the management team. Their faces were tense, their demeanor defensive. Julian spoke first, his voice measured but piercing. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client was subjected to an unprovoked act of violence and blatant discrimination on your company's flight. We're not here for scripted apologies or meaningless promises. We want a concrete plan of action." Mr. Benson interlaced his fingers, his voice trembling slightly despite his effort to appear composed. "We fully acknowledge the serious failure in protocol and have suspended flight attendant Veronica pending a full internal investigation. We also commit to covering all medical expenses for Alina and providing compensation to the family for emotional distress." Camilla met Benson's gaze head-on, her eyes unflinching. "Suspension isn't enough. She hurt my daughter, physically and emotionally. She doesn't just need to be fired, she needs to be held legally accountable for her violent actions." The room fell silent. All eyes shifted toward Benson, filled with unease. He took a deep breath and nodded. "We will cooperate with the authorities to ensure justice is served." Camilla decided to file a formal lawsuit against both Veronica and the airline. The press quickly picked up the story, and news of the infamous SLAP spread like wildfire across social media. Local headlines screamed, "Flight attendant strikes 5-year-old girl, public outcry demands justice." The incident captured widespread public attention. Many expressed outrage through articles, interviews, and online posts. A hashtag number Justice for Alina began trending, with thousands of posts calling for the airline to take full accountability. Camilla received an overwhelming number of messages from strangers, some sharing their own experiences with discrimination in air travel. But amidst the support, there were also criticisms. "She's blowing things out of proportion. It was just a slap. Why does everything have to be about race? Camilla read the negative comments with a composed expression, though they pierced her heart. Still, she reminded herself, I'm not fighting for the critics. I'm doing this for my daughter and for anyone who has been mistreated and couldn't speak up. The date for the official trial was set. That morning, Camilla watched Alina color with her crayons at the kitchen table while they ate breakfast. She leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead, whispering, I'll do everything I can to protect you. Alina looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes and whispered back, I believe you, Mommy. Camilla smiled, warmth and determination swelling within her. The trial would be where she fought for justice, not just for her daughter, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. The day of the trial finally arrived. The courtroom was packed, filled with journalists, Camilla's supporters, human rights organizations, and families who had faced similar circumstances. They were there not just to witness a trial, but to see justice served. Camilla sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands clasped together on the wooden surface, her gaze steady but tinged with nerves. Sitting beside her was her attorney, Julian Reyes, who exuded calm confidence, the demeanor of a seasoned lawyer who had seen it all. In the front row, Alina sat with Camilla's sister, Elena. The little girl clutched her white stuffed bunny, her wide eyes curious but no longer filled with fear. She knew her mother was here to protect her, and that knowledge gave her comfort. Julian stood and spoke, his voice powerful and unwavering. Your Honor, today we are here not only to address an unjust act of assault, but also to confront the prejudice that lies beneath it. My client, Ms. Camila Morales, witnessed her 5-year-old daughter being struck by someone in a position of authority on a commercial flight. This cannot and should not be brushed aside with a mere apology. On the defendant's side, Veronica sat with her hands clenched tightly on the table, as though trying to maintain some semblance of control. Her face was pale, and her eyes occasionally darted toward the journalists recording every detail of the proceedings. Camilla was called to the witness stand. She took a deep breath, her eyes briefly meeting Alina's for strength. I remember that moment so vividly, Camilla began, her voice low but steady. I was just trying to take my daughter to the restroom because she really needed to go. I tried to explain politely, but instead of listening, she raised her hand and struck my daughter. In that moment, I can't describe the pain of a mother watching her child be hurt, not just physically, but emotionally. She didn't just hit my daughter, she stripped away the sense of safety that every child deserves in their mother's arms. The room fell silent, except for the soft scratching of the court reporter's pen. A few people in the audience nodded, visibly moved by Camilla's testimony. Next, Victor, the older man who had stood up for Camilla and Alina on the plane, took the witness stand. He recounted the events with calm precision, though his eyes burned with anger. I saw everything, he said firmly. That wasn't an accident. She didn't stumble or act out of surprise. It was deliberate, and no one has the right to raise their hand against a child. Following Victor, Sandra, the kind-hearted flight attendant, took the stand. Her voice wavered slightly but remained sincere. Alina didn't do anything wrong. I feel deeply ashamed that something like this happened on a flight where I was part of the crew. Camilla and her daughter deserve respect and kindness. When it was her turn, Veronica stood and approached the stand. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to defend herself. I was overwhelmed. I didn't think. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I lost control for a moment. Julian rose from his seat, his expression sharp as he addressed her. You claim it was just a moment of losing control, but tell me, Ms. Veronica, why did that moment of losing control target a mother and her young daughter of color, while other passengers received friendly service from you? Was this really random, or was there something more behind it? Veronica froze, unable to form a response. The courtroom held its collective breath. After deliberation, the judge returned, and all eyes turned to the bench, anticipation thick in the air. The judge looked directly at Veronica, his voice steady and resolute as he delivered the verdict. Defendant Veronica is found guilty of assaulting a minor. The court sentences the defendant to 1 year of probation, mandatory anger management courses, and restitution to the plaintiff. Additionally, the airline is ordered to pay damages and revise its employee training policies to ensure that incidents like this do not happen again. Camila's hands tightened as she listened to the ruling. A wave of calm washed over her, as though the storm within her had finally passed. She looked over at Alina, who was watching her with wide, bright eyes, as if she understood that something good had happened. In the months following the trial, Camila's story sparked a major conversation in the airline industry about passenger rights and discrimination. Airlines large and small revised their employee training policies to emphasize professionalism and fairness in their interactions with passengers. Camila and Alina returned to Portland, where Camila received a formal job offer from the law firm she had interviewed with. They moved into a cozy apartment near the city's largest park. One breezy afternoon, Camila and Alina walked hand in hand through the shaded path lined with trees. Alina skipped happily, her stuffed bunny swinging in her hand as her laughter echoed like a song of resilience and joy. "Mommy, we're not scared of planes anymore, right?" Alina asked, her voice light and curious. Camila bent down and kissed her daughter's forehead. "No, sweetheart, because I'll always be here to protect you." Alina squeezed her mother's hand and whispered, "You're my hero." Camila smiled, her eyes shimmering with pride and peace. She had stood up not only for her daughter, but for everyone who had ever been treated unfairly. And that was the lesson Camila knew Alina would carry with her for the rest of her life. Justice isn't always easy to come by, but when you stand up for what's right, you can change the world.